This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
Today's Tigers Talk podcast is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Detroit Sports Podcast listeners can save 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. Don't miss out. The Athletic has great writers, great in-depth coverage of Detroit sports. If you want to save 20%, don't forget, visit theathletic.com/DSP.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, along to my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing, man?
Vito, always enjoy our conversations. Baseball's back, baby. Got a chance to check out some Grapefruit League action. Interesting stuff. I joked around, Vito, when the Tigers played Florida Southern that in order to hit rock bottom, you had to lose that game, but nobody took stock in it. Nobody cares. They watched it. The Tigers did come back, though, and they got the victory. They've only lost, I believe, once or twice at most in that initial contest, so it's nice to see baseball back, Vito. Listen, I know people will say that there's no expectations this year. You're overly negative and things like that, but in essence, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. Look, whenever two teams compete, I like to watch it. That's the essence of sports. And even though winning might not be at the top of the list, might not be a top priority, it's nice to see pitchers throwing to catchers. It's nice to see what's going on. And, hey, whenever anyone hits a home run in spring training, very fun.
Yeah, spring training is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be full of position battles, young guys emerging onto the scene, especially for the Tigers this year, Doc. And you know why? Because they're going to be so miserable. And there it goes back to me being so darn overly negative when it comes to the Tigers and their major league roster in 2018 in hopes of doing anything of relevance in 2018 as a major league ball club, which might not be anything of high magnitude because we expect, once again, lackluster results pretty consistently. But as spring training does go along, we see some guys emerge, and hopefully we see some young guys emerge, and some position battles, rotation spots get settled. And that kind of segues me into my first topic I wanted to go over with you this week on Tigers Talk, Doc, and that is the signing of Francisco Liriano, a lefty that has been used out of the bullpen, and a guy that hasn't been that effective in the last two seasons, but signed to a one-year, $4 million deal, so cost-effective at the same time.
How'd you hear the news?
I think I found out on Twitter, yeah.
And so when you heard the news, Francisco Liriano signed with the Tigers, what'd you think?
Nice, savvy veteran lefty, not as relevant or consistently effective and successful as he once was and as a starting arm in the majors. But I think of the good days with him, the glory days, per se, of Francisco Liriano and a Twins at uni when the Tigers would have to go up against him so many darn times in a regular season. He isn't that type of starting armor, even that effective as a reliever, a guy that's going to be lights out and get guys out consistently. But he's a lefty, and when you're a lefty, you're still sexy past 35. Which Liriano, I believe, is. So a guy like that can still be kind of effective and produce a little bit at the major league level, Doc.
When I heard the news, I was a little bit surprised because 1 year, $4 million. It was nice to see that he finished the year last year as a reliever for the Houston Astros. Gets himself a ring. Good stuff. But, you know, when I first heard the news, I was a little bit disappointed. I'm like, dude, just keep the money. I mean, if you're going to play the race to the bottom, why are you adding salary? But people have come out and said, look, if he is effective, whether it be a fifth starter or whether he is relegated to the bullpen, if he's successful, then other clubs, what they've done is they've signed him. He's done some things. He gets out to typically a hot start each and every season. He does some things. He is productive. Around the time of the trade deadline, most people around town believe that he'll be flipped. But I'd say I'm still skeptical because when you have a team this bad, Vito, when you have a team likely, when you started seeing some of the lineups that have been put out, and you start seeing projected lineups for the season, I don't see avenues for a guy like Liriano to have success. And if you don't, I know it's throwaway, $4 million, not a lot of money, but in the end, though, Vito, I don't see the Tigers' ability to flip him because I don't think the team's good enough to put up numbers for him so that you can, go out there and actually get something. I believe others are like, okay, they do understand what Al's trying to do, but they'll lowball him. And so, what do you think? You think that based on what the Tigers could show, do you think Liriano was a good signing in terms of trying to maybe push Daniel Norris? Or do you say, you know what, he'll compete, and that's a good thing in camp. You bring on people to compete for jobs. Maybe it helps. Maybe if Liriano can just kind of whisper into Daniel Norris's ear, hey, throw strikes, it's okay. Maybe he can be that mentor for him and maybe help Daniel Norris get over that hump. Maybe it's just an experienced vet that you brought onto the team to help out another player. So there could also be secondary gain for bringing in Francisco Liriano, but I don't see the avenue of being able to flip him because the team is looking, like we say, like there's going to be some deficiencies across the board. Maybe
Liriano will whisper some sweet nothings into Norris's ears and tell him, hey, baby, throw some strikes. It'll be all right, baby. You can do this.
You
big
can
boy.
Do this.
But anyways, I don't think Liriano was signed so much to be a competitor for that fifth starter spot as he was to be a veteran lefty in the Tigers' bullpen. And the Tigers need veteran arms like a Liriano who's been successful in the past. Down the stretch the past 2 seasons, he's been more effective than in the first halves of the past 2 seasons. And before the last 2 seasons was still an effective starter, starting arm every 5th day. Now, he's no longer that. Maybe he'll get a spot start here and there, but I don't think the Tigers signed him with the intention of starting him every 5th day. It is Norris's job to lose, but if it does push Norris at least even a little bit, I say that's effective, the signing then, in that regard as well. Even if it pushes Norris just a little bit to be more of a fighter, a competitor, even though I think really Norris's problem hasn't been being a competitor, being a grinder. It's more the fact that he hasn't been healthy and effective because of health issues, injuries that have flared up for Daniel Norris since he's been acquired and been wearing a Tigers uniform. So I think Norris is the guy with that fifth starter job. It is his job to lose. Now, if he's miserable in spring, his first start, by the way, since last September, will be against the Yankees on Wednesday. So what a mighty test, for Norris right off the bat in spring. But obviously the Yankees will line up, and these guys that have hit for huge numbers in the past, maybe they won't be looking so great right now this early in spring. But still, it's a mighty tough test for Daniel Norris early on in spring, and it's going to get him ready, get him tested as spring goes along and as opening day rapidly approaches, which is when he needs to be ready. So hopefully by that point in time, he effectively has locked down the fifth starter job and looks like a guy that can be a quality arm, not only as a fifth starter, but even to a higher caliber than a fifth starter, which is what you hope for Daniel Norris moving forward as well, Doc.
Have you been reading up on new pitching coach Chris Bosio? It seems like, in terms of what's being reported, that he's trying some new innovative things to help these pitchers out. His job with Daniel Norris is going to be to try and help him slow things down, help him get into an effective rhythm, because Daniel Norris last year was so inconsistent, and a lot of it had to do with the mental side of the game. I'm really surprised to hear that because of the fact that once you get a little bit more experience, it does lead me to be a little bit concerned regarding Daniel Norris when every time there's something going on, he kind of speeds up. He's not in rhythm. There's challenges in terms of the mental side of the game. But Chris Bosio's job is going to be to help fix Daniel Norris. And I just don't like to hear that because, when you get to the major league level, you got to be able to throw strikes. And that's one of the important things. That's one of the big jobs you have is to go out there, find your rhythm, do something that you can repeat. And now with a young team, Daniel Norris is going to be tasked with going out there and being a contributor. So Chris Bosio's got an interesting job. You hearing anything about him? Anything you can share?
I think positive stuff from Chris Bosio and working on the mental game for these pitchers who maybe need some mental help, mental strength, mental fortitude, whatever you want to call it. Because some of these pitchers have struggled in the past with mental issues and mentally being ready and prepared every single time they go out there on the mound and start for the Tigers. So Norris, maybe a few issues in between the ears, let's say right in his head in the past that has tormented him, has brought him down, and has caused him not to be as effective as he could have been. So Bosio, I think, focusing on that aspect of things with these starting arms and pitchers in general throughout spring, I think can only be effective and helpful for all these guys, including Daniel Norris, who once again, I think a large part of his struggles in recent memory last season specifically was due to health issues. He was tormented by injuries, and because of that, he wasn't the same, was never able to be the same Daniel Norris that we saw when the Tigers got him in that David Price deal. Now kind of way back, but in 2015, mid-season, they acquired Daniel Norris, and since then, he really hasn't taken many steps forward to become an effective, even third starter in the Tigers rotation, which is what they imagine he can be, if not in 2018, it better happen in 2019 from Daniel Norris stock.
And you know the pace of spring training? I can't believe it. You know game 1 is March 29th.
Already, it's earlier than usual. So we
Yeah.
got to be ready and on our game even earlier than usual.
March 29th, baby. I can't
Uh-huh.
wait. It's going to be against the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's going to be fascinating to see. I mean, it's coming up quickly. I know we're getting close to March. The week this drops, we'll be in March.
Yeah, already.
Unbelievable.
Isn't that something?
Did you peek at Michael Fulmer's first start?
Well, you know what? I did not actually.
Oh, Vito.
I did not.
Why
so
not?
I can't really break it down too much. Well, I've had some, other stuff going on. And you can boo me, let the boo birds come out. I'm more worried about how he progresses throughout spring. Same thing with Daniel Norris, by the way.
Okay, because I am the professional on this
You did
very
check
fine
it out.
I did. He threw 23 pitches over 2 strong innings, allowing 1 hit. He allowed a solo home run to outfielder Trey Mancini in the first inning, but he struck out 2 and threw pretty much all of his pitches pretty well. So it's, obviously the first go around, and it's okay, but I'm starting to hear whispers, Vito. I'm starting to hear that around March 29th, when opening day hits, there's going to be a name out there that's going to be called upon to start for the Tigers. Do you think Michael Fulmer's worthy of getting the ball opening day, number 1?
Fulmer better be ready because nobody else is ready. And how about the funny quip that Ron Gardenhire made recently? Ask Alexa, he said to Anthony Fennick. Fennick tweeted it out. Their number 1 starter has to be Michael Fulmer. And I think it is kind of clear-cut. If Fulmer's healthy and ready to go by opening day, he is the opening day starter and should be.
Right. News regarding him, simple, is that, the surgery's gone well. He's out of rehab. He is ready to go. By all accounts, he's healthy.
Yeah.
And so that's really good news. I'm excited to hear that Michael Fulmer, the horse, the guy that we need to be healthy. So we got to do what we got to do to keep Michael Fulmer healthy, because he's going to be the horse of the team, and he's going to go out there and be required to throw a lot of innings, and he's got to take that next step. And basically, he's got to be a leader on this team at a young age. I think his 3rd season.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough on him as a youngster still. Does he have that savvy veteran presence yet to lead the Tigers rotation? I don't know if he's capable of that, but he's got the most talent. The most high-caliber ability to be a frontline starting arm. He has shown that in the past. He's been the American League Rookie of the Year in 2016. Last year was still good. Maybe he didn't take a huge step forward. But if we get what we got out of Michael Fulmer in 2017, he won't be the problem in 2018. And I don't think anybody in their right mind expects him to be the problem at all in 2018 either. It's about other rotation and bullpen issues and other lineup issues, and some issues in the lineup maybe have already been resolved. Gardenhire, by the way, here's one note to bring up, has already brought up that Leonis Martin, the new Tigers starting center fielder, will be the opening day leadoff hitter. So he will be that guy, has been hitting leadoff so far. And the second hitter might not be Iglesias, who was batting second to start off spring. Now, lately, it has been Jeimer Candelario, who I like more in that 2-hole. And do you know why? Because he hits for pop. Iglesias can't. And now the traditional 2-hole hitter was a guy that was speedy, could get on base, which Iglesias, by the way, doesn't do very well, and then could steal a base when he gets on the bases. Well, now the new number 2 hitter is more of a guy that has some pop in his bat. So that's why it seems like Jeimer Candelario at this point, Doc, in Major League Baseball with analytics and the movement of analytics, Candelario is the best case scenario, the more perfect fit to hit number 2 over Jose Iglesias big time, in my opinion. And if Candelario hits like he did down the stretch with the Tigers once he was acquired from the Cubbies, well, that's a guy that hit above 300 with the Tigers in 2017 down the stretch. So if he comes anywhere close to doing that and hits with some pop, which he's capable of at the hot corner, well, then you got a great number 2 hitter, Doc, every single day.
Now, I want to take a quick time out. I know we got to show love to the sponsors, but when we come back, there's a player that I kind of want to talk to you about because he got hot last year. And unfortunately, he suffered an injury. A player for the Detroit Tigers could be called upon, but I'm starting to feel like he's going to end up in the minors based upon numbers. But there's a player that got off to a hot start last year, and we'll talk about him next on this fine episode of Tigers Talk.
And Doc, since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission, one of our fine sponsors at the DSP Network, has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and even international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands and thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, including the 2018 Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic, which I am helping out with once again, then please follow the Detroit Sports Commission, the DSC, on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their fine website at DetroitSports.org. back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and company, and we were talking about somebody that got hurt, that you wanted to discuss here in the second half of this week's episode, Doc, and who might that be, by the way?
I want to talk to you about Jim Adduci because
Adduci.
I read a little bit about him last year, and remember prior to his oblique injury, which is such a tough injury when you're a batter because of the fact that, you know what, in terms of the mechanics of the swing, it kind of really limits you when you got an oblique injury. But if you remember last year, Vito, he got hot and he was smacking the baseball and he was doing some things. But, you know, when you suffer an injury like that, it kind of derails you because it's hard to come back from. It limits you. And when he came back, he didn't look like the same player, obviously, and it's hard to come back from when you have an injury like that. But a guy like that, I know that right now he's projected to start off in the minors in 2018, but a guy like that could be an unsung hero. You need more of that, in essence, is what I'm trying to say. This year, we need some guys that maybe we are not talking about a whole heck of a lot to step up and do some things similar to, basically, we need some of these role players to step up for these Detroit Tigers. They're going to be called upon, and if you get a guy from the minors that comes up, gets the opportunity, you need him to do some things. But Jim Adduci, you know, if he has a good spring, maybe could make a name for himself, and maybe could be a guy that you could flip and do some things with if you let him go.
Adduci from Adduci. It is Jim Adduci, and he's a career minor leaguer for a reason. But I think what you're trying to say, too, is that we need guys that can just hit, flat out hit. And to get through this season, we need to find guys that can hit. And we might need extra alcohol, too, to get through this Tiger season than usual, to keep watching and to keep being entertained.
Because
it will be tough. And Adduci, we would hope a guy like that, does emerge maybe onto the scene as even a bench bat. You're right.
Did he move the needle for you at all last year? Did he get on your radar?
I was on Team Adduci. I was actually last year for a while. He hit well enough to sustain a major league spot. And he did for a while. Then he got hurt. Wasn't the same after that. And guys aren't going to be, and especially a guy that's been a career minor leaguer with not as much talent. So for me, I'm on his team again. I mean, at this point, anybody that can hit a little bit and look a little bit sexy at the major league level in terms of maybe have a little bit of hop in his bat, get on base a little bit, which I believe he can, well, then you got a guy at least as a fourth outfielder, a guy that's going to be a fourth outfielder at best the rest of the way throughout his major league career anyways. But even with this ball club, as dismantled, as depleted as they might be, when you look at their outfield alignment come opening day, you have Leonis Martin, I already spoke about, in center field hitting leadoff to start the season. In right, you have Nick Castellanos, has to prove his worth with the glove, right, out in right. In left field, you have Mikey Matuk. By the way, a big question there, how will he hit? He hit great in the second half last year, but maybe in the first half of this year, you could say a guy like Jim Adduci might actually out-hit Mikey Matuk, because we don't know what to expect out of Mikey Matuk out of over a full season. Is he a full season major leaguer that can be a starter for a full season and be effective as a full-time starter the whole entire season? We don't know that yet about Mikey Matuk. The verdict is still out. And what do you think we'll end up finding out about Mikey Matuk by the end of this season, Doc?
Do you feel like he could be a leader on this team? Because he seemed like he provided an emotional spark several times last year. I mean, key catches, key hits at opportunistic times. I think he could be somebody that I think he can be a solid role player, but can you count on him to be, really productive and emerge as somebody you can count on for like 80 RBIs in a year? Probably not.
And that's the thing. You're going to have to find guys. You're going to need guys to be able to do that. That's why you have to find these guys. Anybody that can come close to maybe driving in 80 runs. Let's say, give me 70 to 75, and we might be satisfied with a guy like Mikey Matuk at this point.
Okay, so last year, who would you say were some unsung heroes that kind of stepped up? I know Adduci for me. Maybe some people will say Shane Green kind of has stepped up, and he did a decent job. Maybe you could say he stepped up and earned the closer job, but kind of towards the end of the season kind of tailed off. Any unsung heroes that caught your eye last year?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about one, in Mikey Matuk. I think Mikey Matuk really, once again, emerged onto the scene big time in the second half of last year, and out of nowhere. Because I remember saying last year in the first half of the season, I thought he couldn't hit a lick and to save his life. He never got PT, though. Brett Ausmus, the former skipper, the erroneous skipper, in recent memory of the Tigers, well, now gone, and we're glad about that. He didn't start. He didn't play Mikey Matuk. Matuk didn't garner enough ABs to really see and find out what he's made of at the plate. We got to see more of that in the second half when he got more PT because of trades such as the one of Justin Upton. And then Mikey Matuk, well, he really got more PT. JD Martinez, really once JD was dealt. We saw more from Mikey Matuk specifically, but even Nick Castellanos, who started playing in right last year down the stretch, which was good to see Nick Castellanos get the chance to develop out there in right. And Mikey Matuk played center also in left field, to see him get the chance to develop in the corner outfield, but also in center a little bit, can cover some ground. He's fleet of foot. He's a high-caliber athlete. But now we got to see him hit to sustain his job on a full-time basis in 2018. And the verdict, once again, is still very much out there. And you know what? With that being said, I mean, I believe in Mikey Matuk. I do. Now, the thing is, it's hard to say what you're going to get out of him, though, at the plate. It's hard to guarantee a stat line for Mikey Matuk. And I think that's the case with a lot of these players, even these guys that have been good in the past, but maybe had down years last year, like a Miguel Cabrera, like a Victor Martinez, like a Jordan Zimmerman. Well, they bounce back. There's so many question marks across the board. And that's why it's probably of utmost importance that a guy like Jim Adduci, or a guy of that caliber, a minor leaguer, borderline major leaguer, emerges onto the scene and outperforms expectations. Even in center field, Leonys Martin, back to him. Not a great hitter, hasn't hit the greatest in recent memory, really, throughout his major league career as a whole. But we got to see him hit a little bit more as well and getting on base at a higher, more efficient clip to sustain that leadoff position atop the Tigers lineup all season long. And will we get that? But that's another question mark, another thing you would like to see out of a Tigers player. A guy like Leonys Martin, him hitting and getting on base much more consistently than he has in recent memory, Doc.
Understood. Now, you said you had an article that you wanted to bring to the table that you read, wanted to review and get some thoughts on. Hit me up.
Yeah, Chris McCoskey of the Detroit News, a guy that we've never had on these airwaves. Maybe we will one day. He is the Detroit Tigers beat writer for the Detroit News. And this article focuses on Daniel Norris and Francisco Liriano. We kind of already covered this, actually. But about Norris now having the chance for the first time this spring to start Wednesday, the day of this episode dropping, against the Yankees. Big-time test against the Bronx Bombers. And will he be ready? Will he be sharper than last year? Had a good, efficient outing last year in his last outing against the Royals. So allowed 2 hits, was very effective. It was like September 28th, at the very end of the season. The thing is, it comes down to consistency with a lot of these players, no matter what age they may be. But Norris is still relatively being young. The hard part will be for him, well, first and foremost, to stay healthy and then to be consistently effective. And will he, at this stage in his career, relatively young, still be effective every 5th day for the Tigers in their rotation? The verdict, once again, is still out about him. But I do expect him to be better. I'll just say that, to be better than last year. But once again, it's largely dependent upon the fact that he is more healthy than last year.
Okay.
And you can't predict health. You can't, right, Doc?
You cannot predict health. Now, a name that kind of has been talked about a little bit too, a minor leaguer that kind of now needs to get his way up and do some things, is Cam Gibson. Tigers' 5th-round pick out of Michigan State in 2015, is 24 years old. He's promoted to High A Lakeland last year, likely where he'll start, but the Tigers are hoping that he can progress up until the point where he can be in Double A by the season's end. And it's a big year for him. And some of these minor leaguers, you kind of, if you look at like the likes of Derek Hill, you look at Faedo, you look at some of these minor leaguers, there's going to be some expectations that within, single A, double A, triple A, that some of these dudes take the next step. Have you picked it all at Cam Gibson?
Well, I'm going to say I think he'll be better than a Patrick Leland or a Mario Mpemba son who got drafted also by the Tigers. Rod Allen's son, by the way, was also drafted by the Tigers. There's like a line of outfielders that really haven't turned out, that have had some lineage to the Tigers organization. Even Daniel Fields, do you remember the name? From U of D Jesuit. His father, Bruce Fields, was a hitting coach for the Tigers at one point. Had other roles, I believe, as well in the Tigers organization way back in the day now, at this point. But Cam Gibson, he's going to have some athleticism because of his father being Kirk Gibson. Now, what else will his career lead to? What else does his arsenal, per se, entail? That's really the question mark about him.
And the reason why his name kind of showed up on my radar was there was an article kind of just talking a little bit about some people who disappointed in the Arizona Fall League. And with what he did there, it seemed like when he faced some of the top AA and AAA pitchers, kind of had a rough go of it a little bit.
Yeah, and they need some guys like that to emerge. Once again, going back to minor leaguers, prospects, middle tier to top prospects, lower tier, just guys that they need to have emerge onto the scene, at least move up through the farm system, make progress going into 2019 even. At this point, Derek Hill has to take the next step. Okay. Kristen Stewart has to take the next step. Guys like that are middle tier prospects, maybe more top tier because of the Tigers farm system still not being great as a whole. But those guys, no doubt, have to start emerging onto the scene and at least making progression throughout the farm system, getting to AAA eventually, and showing signs of progress at, well, those higher levels, including AA Erie, and AAA Toledo, Doc.
Couple things before we get out of here. I want to talk about some rule changes that have been made, and I do believe maybe the Tigers might be affected greatly because it's a situation where Major League Baseball is trying their absolute darndest to bring down the pace of play. I think last year the average game was about 3 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was over 3 hours, which is bad.
I think the length of game was probably at an all-time high, and you can't have that. A baseball game, I think in its entirety, should run between 2.5 hours and 2 hours and 45 minutes. And so what baseball's trying to do is maybe limit the amount of times that infielders, catchers, and managers can go out to the mound. And so I think the number is set at 6 total.
It is, yep.
Okay, are you upset by that? Do you feel like, because infielders, pitchers, catchers, they're all chirping, they're all like, we don't like this, and it could be a situation where you have a young team like the Tigers, and you have, young pitchers and experienced pitchers, and they're trying to do some things, you might need those extra mound visits. But for me, I'm in agreement. I think that one of the things that slows down games is when the batter keeps going in and out of the batter's box, and when, the pitcher and the catcher can't get on the same page and they keep going through these signals. I do like it. 6 total visits for the entire game. I like it. But do you think it could hurt the purity of the game?
Well, Lance McCullers Jr., I believe, is the guy and the notable individual that brought up concerns and was butthurt about this move by Major League Baseball. For me, though, I'm not a pitcher or a major leaguer. So if I'm a pitcher, though, specifically, I'm probably a little bit offended and feeling slighted by this rule change because as a pitcher, you want as much time as possible, even as a hitter. And the thing is, if you really want to take the contrarian point of view, it's that these guys have their intricacies built up from over the years. They have been firmly established. And these guys, especially the ones that are more veteran savvy, aren't going to change, right? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And once a guy has his habits at the plate, on the mound, do you think these individuals really want to change their ways because of a rule change by Major League Baseball? No way. No way, Jose, Doc. And that's just the way a lot of these guys think. And for me, once again, I'm an outsider looking in as a fan. I'm not going to be butthurt by it because it will help out with the speed of the game. And that's the goal of this rule change, Doc.
A radical change was brought about by Rich Eisen. I don't know if you heard it.
I saw this was horrible.
I thought it was interesting, but
interesting, but horrible. I guess it'll be interesting and intriguing, but it's horrible.
For those of you that didn't hear it, on his radio program, the Rich Eisen Show, he kind of was talking, bantering, because every so often, like you and I, we just kind of talk about how to improve the game. He said, and he came up with it, and it's been widely panned, but I thought it was interesting. At the very least, he said, in the 9th inning, you can basically bring up anybody in your batting order. And so, if you're down by a run, you could bring up Miggy, you could bring up Nick Castellanos, you could bring up Vmart, any 9th inning you wanted to, and just put up anybody that you want and not have a formal batting order in the 9th inning. It's radical. It would change the game in its entirety, but it would be interesting, too, because you'd have your best pitchers, you'd have your closer against, potentially Hall of Famers. What'd you think when you heard that? Were you one of the people that just lampooned it like everybody else?
It's too radical.
Too radical?
This hippie baseball? I mean, are we going to do a charity softball game? Is it my charity softball game where anybody can go up and get an AB because it's for charity? And it's a softball game that has no meaning truly or relevance in terms of who comes out on top? Come on. It's a Major League Baseball game with the outcome meaning something, especially for a team that's in contention, trying to win, trying to make the playoffs, needs that game. Needs to win that game to make it into the playoffs as a wild card team, even, or to win its division by a game over the team that's in second place. So you can't make that rule change. It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. It's so radical. It's so irrational because it's so radical. Out of left field would never happen because then you give an advantage to a team that has a great batter. You can put up there in the 9th inning to try to get a hit for your team to save the game for your club when the opposing team is up. That's not fair. That's not traditional baseball. And baseball, which is a very traditional, old-school game, is not going to change its ways in that category or in that way. And it shouldn't. Major League Baseball should not make that rule change at all. You
know what? I got something radical, too, to change the game. You want to hear it?
What is that?
More runs the farther you hit the ball. After the 7th inning, if you hit the ball 465 feet plus, you get 2 runs.
Ooh, not just 1 run.
Your
Once
run
again,
is
is
worth
this
more.
is this like a celebrity or charity softball game where we're just changing the rules by the minute?
But you get somebody like Miguel Cabrera. He's up there and he realizes he's got to swing out of his shoes. Then you recognize there's some pressure. But if he launches one 465 and the Tigers are down 1, a 2-run homer.
So you tack on another run for Miguel Cabrera.
You get an extra
just
run.
Just unfair.
And then guess what? You go 500, you get 3 runs.
Oh, wow. What is this now? I mean,
That's a good idea, huh?
yeah, so we're making it where guys are just swinging, which, by the way, they're already swinging for the fences because of the analytical movement that's been established. It's about the long ball, and Kane doesn't matter as much. But
Okay.
it should stick the long ball, but that won't ever happen either. I like your radical mind.
Not too bad.
Hey, you're
though,
trying
right?
to come up with stuff on the fly here. Not a bad try, but yeah, it's not going to happen, Doc.
And then before we get out of here, the biggest news of the week, JD Martinez inked his name to the Boston Red Sox. I felt like when I saw the deal, the numbers, fair deal. Very fair. I think the Boston Red Sox waited it out, and I think the market did correct to the point where you're not committing $30 million plus. I think he's making, about $22 million per on
North
average.
of 20,
But
and he can
it's
opt out.
front-loaded.
It's
Yep.
front-loaded. He can opt out after 2 years. That's the craze in baseball.
That's the crave. That is the craze, is giving these players an option to become a free agent again in 2 years, which incentivizes him to do well. I feel like Boston really did some good things there by signing JD Martinez. He will do some awesome things offensively in that lineup. Wow, look at Boston, look at New York. The AL East is going to be a fun division if you want to peek, if you don't want to pay attention to what's going on in the AL Central, because if you just kind of rank it now, I probably would put the AL East as the top division in the American League, and then you got the AL Central all the way in the bottom.
All the way in the bottom, because the Indians should win by a landslide. Even the Twins, who have been heavily ranked as number 2, the second best team in the AL Central, they might not even have a chance, really, at coming close to catapulting the Indians for first place this season. And really quick, regarding the American League East, should be great front-loaded because of the Yankees and Red Sox and their presences, right? The huge bats in their respective lineups. Now, JD Martinez, though, is like the Red Sox's attempt just to try once again, emphasize that word, to keep up with the Yanks, major sluggers in the middle of their order, because nobody's going to keep up with the heart of the Yankees order in 2018.
I can't wait to see it. So do you think JD will be successful?
It's an impactful signing. He's a potent bat in the prime of his career. Should still be very impactful. If he can hit down the right field line at Fenway, that's an instantaneous home run for JD Martinez, a guy, anybody with close to the home run power that JD Martinez possesses. So he could have a monstrous season at Fenway Park. He really could. And that, once again, is the Red Sox's attempt to try to keep up with the Yankees and what they have done this offseason.
Very good podcast recording, sir. Anything else on your mind?
Anything else on my mind? Oh, just once again, going back to something I've said already in this podcast, I've got to probably drink a lot to really have fun with the Tigers this year. And we hope, once again, all kidding aside, that guys do emerge. And maybe, we had the conversation this week, that maybe a guy that is of a lower caliber, maybe not even a prospect, but a Jim Adduci can contribute. A Brian Pena. I don't care who it is, just we need to find somebody that can contribute. And then you want to see even those middle tier prospects, those under the radar prospects, contribute more and more, and at least, Doc, at the very least, move up through the Tigers farm system significantly in 2018.
If you've enjoyed this podcast recording, check out this podcast that drops every single Wednesday, DetroitSportsPodcast.com, and everywhere else that you can find podcasts. Thank you for your continued support. DetroitSportsPodcast.com, the hub of the operation, DSP Network, doing some fun things. Enjoy the chat, Vito.
Follow us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. Follow me if you would like to make me happy at Vito Jerome. Adios.